Good day, spiritual artists. This is CJ Miller, your host, and we are moving ahead to chapter 5 of Be Present to Your Process in our Doodle Book Reading Club. Quote, when you sit quiet and watch yourself, many things may come to the surface. Do nothing about them. Don't react to them. As they have come, so they will go by themselves. All that matters is mindfulness, total awareness of oneself, or rather, of one's mind. Sri Saragada Maharaj. Chapter 5, Be Present to Your Process. My painting mentor, Virginia Cobb, would gather us in her charming, light-strewn studio on the outskirts of Santa Fe for our daily morning lessons. Coffee in hand, she would explain the day's lessons and give us new painting instructions. During one of these sessions, she challenged us to pay attention to our process, to watch ourselves as we paint. She asked us to be present in our approach. How do we apply the brush, build the layers, and assemble the composition of our work? I was surprised to discover that up until that very lesson, I had never examined my own process. I thought I had simply stood before the canvas and applied paint in a random pattern. But upon reflection, I realized that wasn't exactly true. I followed Virginia's advice and began to watch myself at work. I realized that I did have a specific procedure or method when painting. I started with the same base color or chose the same direction for my canvas. I noticed that I leaned toward vertical compositions. I preferred creating the same shapes, mostly regular ones or angular ones. I was attracted to a certain type of brushstroke. As I followed Virginia's instructions, I realized that I subconsciously employed individual preferences that affected my process in the final work. Her assignment helped me recognize that I have a style and a technique specific to my expression. I had a particular set of artistic tools that I continually relied upon, and I returned to them again and again. Even if it was only on a subconscious level, I had chosen to return to those preferences in a sort of autopilot method. In many cases, I wasn't even consciously aware of my choices. Virginia's exercise expedited our inner self-awareness. It is only through watching ourselves that we realize who we have chosen to be as artists. Every painter has an artistic toolbox. Often, we are unaware of what tools and techniques we use. This is a tremendous artistic practice. Watch your process, understand it, and change elements for different results. For example, I learned to turn my canvas horizontally to challenge myself to explore new compositions. My teacher continued to encourage us to push beyond our past experience. If we often worked with tons of colors, we should try working with black and white only. If we found ourselves repeating the same horizontal composition, we should attempt a vertical painting. One exercise I found particularly interesting. Most artists prefer the same color palette. For example, one artist might always paint with burgundy, ochre, brown, and gray. In this case, Virginia might challenge her to incorporate pink into her composition. The student would often find that adding this extra color into her palette would challenge her expression. Often there was a period of struggle, of learning to incorporate the pink into her painting. However, she may then discover that together pink and ochre have great chemistry. This activity helps the artist move beyond past limitations and expand their toolbox. A little side note here, grab a different color pencil while you're doodling and try it. In fact, grab a pencil that you really don't like that color and try it. Onward we read. Virginia first demonstrated that we must practice conscious self-awareness. We must look inward to recognize our process, and then we are asked to expand our creative scope by incorporating new techniques and tools. Every artist has gathered beliefs, thoughts, and ways of viewing the world in which they return to in the process of creation. The first step to becoming a spiritual artist is to watch our process, recognize our preferred tools, and be consciously aware of our choices. The most important lesson to learn from this practice is that the spiritual artist has the power to choose their tools. After all, we are not our tools, and we can choose which ones we want to use. We are taught to believe that the combination of our beliefs about family, society, and humanity, and the tools that we choose are our very essence. They are not. We are. We are the quiet presence, the thinker, the watcher, the connection to creative intelligence behind the manifested. We are eternal, individualized expressions of creative intelligence. By practicing conscious self awareness, we can learn that we are much more than our process. However, when we too closely associate our value with our process, or rather our need to always paint with certain colors, we separate ourselves from this greater power. For example, I've met many artists that so closely identify with their artist ego identity that they choose to separate themselves from other creators. I work with oil paint on natural linen canvas, one might say, while deriding another artist who works in found objects. While there are superior levels of technical experience, we are all spiritual artists. We are all one. Possessing a specific skill does not make one spiritual artist superior to another. I'm going to read that again. Possessing a specific skill does not make one spiritual artist superior to another. All forms of creation are equal in creative intelligence. Whether you decide to create a traditional still life in heavy pigment oil or choose to arrange some flowers on the dining room table, you are a spiritual artist. Whether you decide to raise two children or design a three-dimensional sculpture with bottle caps, you are a spiritual artist. I repeat, we are all equal in creative intelligence. However, as creative intelligence, interacting with creative intelligence, we have the conscious ability to recognize our tools and choose which ones we would like to employ in the process of creation. As my painting skills grew, I realized from Virginia's exercise that I was developing my toolbox of techniques. I would pull from this toolbox randomly and now consciously for effect. I learned to continually challenge myself by adding new tools and sometimes putting them down. This process never stops. I continue to add new techniques to my painting method. The creative process continues to expand. Yes, that is correct. We have the choice to put down a tool or technique that is no longer serving us. As spiritual artists, we get to choose which tools to keep and which to release. Be a spiritual artist. Understand your tools and choose wisely, but recognize that you are not your tools. You are connected to creative intelligence. You may have a process, but you are not your process. You are not defined by the limitations of your self-image, but by the quiet, still place behind the process. You are the watcher, and you can choose what tools you use and manifest new outcomes. Learning to separate the two is critical to becoming empowered in the creative process. What I mean by this chapter, most importantly, is to recognize that your skill level or what tools you use or what media you practice in does not define you. What defines you is that creative essence inside, that way of tapping into the creative essence. Too many of us start associating with our work. We start thinking that we are the value of our own work, and we are not valuable if our work is not selling, or we are not worthy if our work is not perfect or complete or the best example of a watercolor. That's not the case. And so what I want you to understand here is that you are separate from your skill level, but also that your skill level is comprised of all the experiences that you've had. Everything in your life, the way you were raised, where you were born, the religion you were raised under, the country you were raised in, that all contributes to how you view life. And it might even contribute to what colors you pick, interestingly enough. Certain parts of the world choose and reflect and are connected to different colors. But you know what? You can break out of that. And you can say, oh, I want to reach out for this mustard yellow that isn't something most people in America reach out for, but I'm going to use it in my paintings. We are at choice. As a spiritual artist, we are at choice. So I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I look forward to following along this process, and we'll see you tomorrow. and be a spiritual artist.
Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.